Hello, I'm Pastor Jeremy Combs coming to you here from the Lyford Bible Baptist Church, and we're so glad you're joining us. The song you've been hearing this year as the Bible study begins is a wonderful hymn entitled Wonderful Words of Life, and I love that hymn because it talks about how wonderful the Word of God is. And so I hope you are appreciating the Word of God. Sometimes there's encouragement in the Word of God, and sometimes there is great challenge and great warning. And here in 2 Samuel chapter 11, we see just that. We're smack dab in the middle of a sad affair in the life of David, and that is his affair with Bathsheba, which is going to lead to more sin. And we often talked about last time about sin, and then we talked about how sin is like bananas. You always see bananas in a bunch. And typically, and I would say almost all the time we sin, we usually don't just do one sin because there is something in our human nature that leads us to want to try to cover up that sin, which leads to many different things, as you're going to see in the life of David. As we've been looking over the last or the first 11 verses, we've seen that David's sin began with a look, then he lusted. Then, of course, he lured Bathsheba's wife, and he laid with her. He then lied to cover it up. And then we're going to see a couple of more things that are going to just continue to trickle down. Verse 12, and David said to Uriah, tarry here today also, and tomorrow I will let thee depart. So Uriah abode in Jerusalem that day and the morrow. So remember to try to cover up David's sin. He doesn't confess his sin, which really could have told a different tale in this chapter and may have really changed the way the end of the book of 2 Samuel will play out. But like most of us, instead of doing what is right, he tries to do what he thinks is best for him. And he decides instead of confessing his sin, he's going to cover it up. And so he brings Uriah home from the battle, says, how are things going? Uriah probably is perplexed. Typically, this would be something of a servant would be sent, a messenger boy, as we kind of say today, who would come and would relay this information. And we find that David's whole thought is he's going to go home. He's going to spend time with his wife. They'll sleep together. And then that will be the cover up for this baby that is on the way. And so he sends Uriah home, and he sends him with a full catered meal, and just hoping he'll go and enjoy the comforts and, of course, the comfort of his wife, who he has not been with for some time. But we find Uriah spoils the plans of David because he doesn't go home. No, instead he goes and he sleeps in the servants' quarters outside the gate or the door of the where David resided. And so David is perplexed, and he asks Uriah the question, why did you do this? He said, well, the ark and Israel and all the other soldiers are out in the fields, and how can I go home and eat this great meal and drink and lie with my wife? He says, I will not do this thing. And so verse 12, David says, well, okay, stay. Why don't you stay one more day, and then tomorrow we'll let you depart. Verse 13, and when David had called him, so the next day David calls Uriah in, he did eat and drink before him. So he says, eat with me. What a great honor that would be. That's not something that you could turn away from. And so they ate and they drank before him, and he made him drunk. So we go from looking, lusting, luring, laying, lying, to now he's going to liquor up Uriah. He's purposefully going to get him drunk with a motive in mind. So he made him drunk, and at eve he went out to lie on his bed with the servants of his Lord, but went not down to his house. So David is hoping that when he gets drunk, that he will lose his discernment, he'll lose his character, and he'll go home and be with his wife. It's a couple of thoughts here. My first would be what a sign or what a reminder it is or a sign it is of what alcohol can do to us. David, in manipulating Uriah, purposefully got him drunk because he was hoping then he would behave foolishly, he would behave out of character. You say, well, should a Christian drink wine? Well, I believe, or alcohol, the Bible's clear. I think we should abstain from it. Now, there's some that say, well, you can have a little, or as long as you drink and you don't get drunk. Well, I tell you what, the best way to not get drunk is to not to take that first drink. Okay, why would you even entertain such a thing that could break down your character and cause you to make foolish decisions? But my second point is this, and this is the sad point. Uriah drunk had more character than David when he was sober. That's what sin does to us. It really has similar effects to alcohol, where it breaks us down our character and makes us behave foolishly. So Uriah drunk doesn't go home. He goes right back to where the servants are, and he beds down for the night and he goes to sleep. Verse 14, and it came to pass in the morning that David wrote a letter to Joab and sent it by the hand of Uriah. And he wrote in the letter saying, set ye Uriah in the forefront of the hottest battle, and retire ye from him, that he may be smitten and die. Whoa. So David goes from looking, lusting, luring, laying, lying, liquoring up to now he is loathing this man who was nothing but loyal to David and his kingdom. He is one of the mighty men of David, who when all else forsook him, Uriah was one of the ones that said, we will fight for you, David. We will be with you, David. I remember evangelist Tom Farrell, when I was a teenager, said something, and I have never forgotten it. He said this, indulgent people ultimately become indifferent people. That is when we feed our flesh, when we are selfish and only make decisions for us. By the way, that's sin. We ultimately become indifferent to the very people we love the most. And here's a man who was nothing but loyal to David. In fact, he's so loyal to David that as a fighting man, he comes home and says, I can't go home. I need to be ready for battle. At a moment's notice, we may get news from Joab, and I may have to get on a horse, or I may have to walk back to the battle, and I want to be ready. And so David sends a letter with Uriah. And the tragedy of this, Uriah, and this speaks again of Uriah's character. He carries his own death sentence back to Joab. And David had such strength and well, I'm just grasping, I'm not getting the word here. He knew Uriah so well. Let's go that route, okay? That he knew he wouldn't look at the letter. Wow. What character Uriah had. This was the kind of guy that David ought to want to be right next to him and continue serving the kingdom. But no, the fact of the matter is now Uriah is getting in the way of David's debauchery, David's diabolical plans. And so David is going to have his life snuffed out. Joab, it says, it came to pass when Joab observed the city that he assigned Uriah unto a place where he knew the valiant men were. So this is right up Joab's alley. Joab probably read the letter, and this is the character of Joab. He probably smirked, probably had a little smile and thought, ha, here is good old Mr. Man after God's own heart, David, and he's just like the rest of us. He is not, he's carrying a grudge. No doubt, I would venture to say Joab didn't know everything. Now, eventually, maybe he figured things out, but at this point, all he can surmise is that Uriah has made David angry and that David wants him eliminated. You say, why would Joab carry out such an order for such a good and loyal soldier? Well, Joab probably thought, now I've got something on David. Joab is on a short leash with David. He's done many things that have caused great heartache to to David, like when Joab murdered Abner, the uncle or the leader of Saul, the leader of the army of Saul. And so Joab is probably thinking down the road, thinking, I'm on this short leash, and the next time David wants to give it a yank or pull, I'm going to say, do you remember that letter that you sent to me? By the way, both Joab and David are wrong. But the greatest wrong of the two would be that of David, because David is asking Joab to do something wrong. He's going to have a man murdered, and yet Joab is not, yes, Joab is not clean. He's not innocent in this. He's going to follow these orders. You say, but Pastor Jeremy, isn't Joab a general? Shouldn't he be doing what his king tells him to do? Not when it conflicts with what God would have us to do. And we definitely know that God would not have us take life. You say the excuse is, though, that this is war. Well, that is true. But it's one thing for someone to be killed in battle. It's another thing to intentionally put someone in a place and withdraw or pull back support so that they will be killed. And so I know some people say the devil is in the details. It certainly is right here. And David is trying to make this look as clean as possible. And Joab is going to oblige. And so it says in verse 17, and the men of the city went out and fought with Joab, and there fell some of the people of the servants of David, and Uriah the Hittite died also. And so the plan works, what would be in man's minds, to perfection. And Uriah is killed in battle. Unbelievable how far David has come. Is this the same guy that we read about in 2 Samuel chapter 9, just a couple chapters earlier, where he puts aside vengeance, he puts aside animosities towards the house of Saul, and he remembers the covenant that he had made with Jonathan and shows grace and mercy to Mephibosheth? How could a man after God's own heart change? In fact, some people say, how could David even be a man after God's own heart? He's a murderer. He's an adulterer. He's a liar. He's a thief. Well, David was a man after God's own heart when he followed after God. But only one thing could change all that, and that is sin. And so the challenge for all of us today, and we'll wrap this up next time, is it only takes one decision, one choice to lead us down a very difficult path. Sin's like bananas. And whereas David probably just thought, I'm going to take a moment, I like what I saw, and I'm going to kind of fulfill my lust, I'd like to see her body more, led to him then inquiring after her and then finding out who she is. And, we could just have an affair, we could commit adultery just once, and then that'll be that. And then it led to lying, and then it led to him getting people drunk, and then it led to him having people murdered. Boy, be careful, be careful, be careful. You say, do you think that you or I could do that today? Of course we can. Jesus said, out of the heart proceeds adulteries, blasphemies, murders. The heart is deceitful, Jeremiah said, above all things, and it is desperately wicked. So what we need to do today is be on guard against sin. Well, thank you for joining us. We are dropping this just a little bit early because we're smack dab in the middle of our missions conference. And we're hoping that maybe if you see this early enough, you could come join us tonight. Start at 6:45. We've got Evangelist Matt Downs and also Evangelist Will Geisman. And then, of course, tomorrow, which would be Wednesday, would be our final night. And we've got the Lighthouse Mission from Terre Haute that's going to be here. And then also, again, Evangelist Will Geisman will be challenging us. Well, hey, we appreciate you joining us, and we appreciate your love for the Word of God. May God bless you. We'll see you again next time.